Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm really excited about this. This is a product that's been a long time coming, and to be able to sit down with the three of you and really ask some questions that have been on my mind, have been on the minds of customers, been on the minds of people throughout the Chaos organization is a bit of a treat. So first of all, thank you very much. And it's probably worthwhile for us to do a quick round of intros, at least your name and your involvement in this project and why you're here to talk about Envision. I think that'd be a great start. So maybe me as the moderator, I might as well go first. Roderick Bates, and Director of Product Operations here. So a lot of what I do is oversee the various initiatives that we have on the product side. And of course, also serve as a conduit to our customers, which is exactly why I'm functioning as a moderator here. So Anna, you're on my left-hand side of the screen, so why don't you go first?
Yeah, sure, Rod. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna. I'm originally an architect, but I've been with Chaos for almost 9 years now. Initially, I was the product manager of V-Ray for Revit, but for a while now, I've been part of the team working on Chaos Envision.
I think you're still an architect, even if you join Chaos.
Yes, I am. And I'm actually licensed, so I guess.
Oh, very nice.
I am.
And Petter?
Sure thing. Well, also a former architect, though I never quite achieved licensure. Anna's got that on me. But here at Chaos, I'm the Vice President of Solutions for Designers, which are, well, all of our products that are intended for designers. That's primarily Enscape, Enscape Impact, and this new and exciting thing known as Chaos Envision.
All right, and Simeon.
Right. My name is Simeon, and I'm a senior product manager at Chaos. Currently working on the Chaos Envision, but also leading the Chaos Vantage product line. And I have some not architectural background, but more of a visualizer background coming from the visualization industry. And yeah, that's much about it.
I found out recently, Simon, that you started out at Chaos, I believe, as a visual artist. Is that right?
Yes, I was part of the 3D department back at the day. That's
a pretty great trajectory, and I think it kind of speaks to why I really enjoy this company, is that it is a product of, or is our work products, our software are the output of passionate people that have been in the trenches. Here we have people that have been in architecture, been in practice, been visual artists, and I think that reflects in the products themselves, and that's part of why I'm actually excited to ask some hard questions of this group and get down to some real details. And I think one of the first things when I think about what we try to achieve with Envision, or what we say we're trying to help people achieve with Envision, is that we want them to be able to tell stories. And when we think about our various products, and particularly Enscape and Envision, what do we really mean when we're saying that architects need to tell stories? Like, who do they need to tell stories to? Why do they need to tell stories? Why do we think that's important? What are we hearing from our customers about storytelling? Because when you think about designs, like, well, it's about creating blueprints or what have you, or drawing sets or construction. Well, where does the story fit in all of that? So maybe Petter, you can take a first crack at that one.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. We can get philosophical or practical with it, but I think the process of telling the so-called visual narrative is just inherent to pretty much all stages of design and construction of a project. I think there's so many different people that you have to tell that story to, and for me, the biggest answer to the question of why is because images, whether they're still or moving, are a universal language. And the reality is that the majority of the people involved in the design process, they don't have the background or education that Anna might have and that I have. So a lot of the understanding is simply hard to create otherwise. If you show somebody a set of floor plans, yeah, they might understand them if they're professional, but most people are not a professional, and there's really no replacement for the universal language of images. So I think whether it's the building owner, whether it's the community, whether it's potential investors in a building project, I think there's no shortage of people that need and want to understand what's being planned, so that they can, meaningfully and articulately provide feedback to ideally make for a better project that, serves its community and serves its environment a lot better. So I think there's no shortage of opportunities to tell those stories. And I think our job is to make sure that the architects and the designers and all the other supporting functions have the best possible tools in order to be able to communicate their vision to others, and make sure that it's a really collaborative and productive process to design and build a building.
You said I don't want to get philosophical, but when I hear you talk about stories that way in communication, it's almost like you have to, if you take a step back, it's like human history. It's like the stories that parents tell their children in order to learn something, or like a fairy tales that tell you all these cautionary tales about the world and not to trust people, or, what you should look out for, or what you should person you should try to be. And it's interesting that stories are a way of helping people that don't otherwise have context understand things. And you're right. Architectural design is no different in that particular respect. But when it comes to telling a story, and you say, obviously we're helping people tell one type of story, that visual story that you said. But what sort of capabilities does someone need? And so we think about, well, we have Enscape, right? We have V-Ray, all these great tools out there. But what parts of the story are needed that Envision brings to the table? Like, what's the new capabilities that you might have with Envision that can help a designer? And Anna, obviously, you're probably the best person to answer that.
Yeah, so when it comes to storytelling, Envision offers a really powerful set of animation tools that truly bring a project to life. Because, and I can continue on what Peter just said, every building exists within a unique context, and it carries its own scale, and it tells a story through its purpose and design. And simply viewing a static BIM model, or even a static image, even one that is enhanced with trees and with entourage, it often falls short of capturing the energy and the essence of a place. So that's where Envision really shines, because it elevates the experience by letting creators move beyond the static representations to craft dynamic, immersive environments. And Envision has those intuitive features like traffic systems and crowd flow generators, and it makes it easy to simulate movement and real-life interactions. So these elements help convey not just the design, but the lived experience of a project, telling its story in a way that is both visually compelling and emotionally resonant. And additionally, every object can be animated using motion paths, allowing for a high degree of control and expression in how elements behave and interact over time. And there are also advanced camera animations that further enhance the narrative by guiding the viewer's eye to key moments and focal points in the design. Whether it's revealing how a space flows, highlighting a design feature, or building a dramatic sequence, these tools help structure the story with precision and intent. And of course, stories can also be told in more creative and unexpected ways. That's why Envision also includes a design variation system, which basically lets you animate your model as it's progressively being wrapped with materials, or as if it rises up from the ground. And this phasing animation technique, it comes with built-in playful effects, such as components popping or twisting or flying into place to illustrate how a building is constructed or transformed over time. It's a powerful way to show not just what a project is, but how it comes to be.
So, I mean, I now I really want to go on the philosophical side of like how those types of capabilities relate to storytelling. But maybe I'll tone it down a little bit and maybe ask Petter, and then I want to ask Simeon a question. But from your perspective, Petter, when it comes to storytelling, these types of capabilities are ones that, personally, at least from my architectural experience, those would have been something like you'd have to hire out. If you wanted to have your building fly together from a bunch of different components, that type of animation is pretty sophisticated. When you think about Envision, though, is this about trying to take some existing types of storytelling capabilities, animation? So Anna mentioned, traffic systems. I mean, I'm really meaning moving cars that stop appropriately and on the right side of the road and avoid each other, or those buildings flying together and things like that. Are we taking things that used to be sort of the reserve of the really high-end architectural visualization and making them sort of more accessible to regular people?
Yeah, I think we are. At least that's the trajectory that we want to follow. And look, I think we're not the first to go down this trajectory. I think the nice thing about technology is that as it evolves, it also reaches a bigger audience, right? When CAD first came out, that was also reserved for a very select group of people that had access to this hardware, that had time to learn it, to learn how to use it, and to go through all the headaches of being an early adopter. But this day and age, right, that's kind of a standard practice. And that's what I mean. The technology, as it evolves, it also becomes more accessible. And I think we're in a really unique position, having so many different bits of technology and so many products, that not only can we kind of widen that funnel of accessibility, but we can also really capitalize on the interplay between these different technologies and create something really unique and powerful, but also easy to use by the combination of those things. So for me, I think that the short answer is absolutely yes. And Envision is a great example of that. I think when you talk about something like animation, which is not just historically, but still largely is a very complex process, right? I think Envision has a really intuitive, I kind of call it the tweening workflow, right? Where you don't have to necessarily be as explicit as what you would used to be in terms of having to do in a DCC application. You can put in a lot less input, but still get a wonderful output that is both engaging and immersive. And I think as we go even farther into the product's development, I think we're going to continue looking for those opportunities and make things more and more accessible. Absolutely.
So you threw out a term there that maybe not everyone knows, but DCC, and like digital content creation platform that you might have. That's like something you'd use to make a movie, essentially, right? If you're thinking of like a Hollywood movie. And so what I like about this, though, is that we're not trying to tell people how to tell stories differently. But like I said, we really are taking capabilities that just were out of reach for a lot of people. Like no one's going to become all of a sudden a movie studio overnight to be able to better explain their architectural product or their architectural design. But instead, we're giving them the tools that make it possible to do so without that level of knowledge or that sort of that software barrier of entry. And I really like that. But that does bring me to you, Simeon. And then kind of my question here then is, and I think something we're getting a lot of pushback within the community, because we have some tools that obviously do cater towards the media and entertainment industry. And one of those being Vantage. And I think for a lot of people, they really want to understand, well, what is the reserve of Vantage and what is the and I guess we now know pretty well what the strengths are of Envision. Why can't those two overlap? Why are they separate pieces of software? And then, of course, to go back down the other direction is, Enscape, great piece of software. Why can't it have those capabilities of animation and things like that, or model aggregation from multiple sources and things like that? So maybe you can touch on Vantage, Simeon, first, and kind of like what is its core strength, and why can you really not make Vantage Envision, if you will?
Yeah, actually, that's a very valid question,
Well, we're getting it a lot, so I think it must. So whether it's valid or not, we're hearing it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for that. To put it shortly, Vantage was actually designed and developed to be the visualizer's best friend, being a Viewport companion for the DCC tool, again, digital content creation tool.
And why do you need a Viewport companion? I mean, this was something that my eyes were kind of opened when I really started to get into rendering with V-Ray as to why, but I'd like to hear it from you.
Well, during the visualization process, every computer tool actually is designed to first give you an interactive input. So for that reason, they just create a very crude representations of the scene in the so-called viewports using a very low fidelity renders or rendering techniques, typically called rasterizations and whatnot. So in order, however, to make decisions for the design or any type of photorealistic decision, you need a much better quality, much higher quality preview. But also, everyone working with such a tool doesn't want to sacrifice interaction. So we kind of want the best of both worlds: interaction and speed while rendering, while still keeping the photorealistic result as much as possible. So with that, we wanted to address this with Vantage and allow the visualizer artists who are actually always striving for more details, for more refined control, subtle enhancements to perfect how the look is going to be changed by even the smallest light painting, or every aspect of lighting and shading. They need this type of feedback while they're working, and they don't want to again sacrifice the quality. So Vantage addresses this type of challenges. Of course,
just to give an example of that, though, actually, for me, like what really opened my eyes, I was doing a very short video for a conference, and the short video rendered, high quality video, but rendered in V-Ray, it took us 14 hours to render it. And basically, I didn't want to wait 14 hours, especially with this impending deadline, to find out that it was terrible. And so that's where Vantage was a huge advantage. I would be able to see a preview look there and be like, okay, I have pretty high confidence this is how it's going to look. Now I can hit render, wait 14 hours, as opposed to waiting 14 hours saying, oh no, that's not right at all. And there now a half a day's gone.
Yes. One of the biggest use cases of Vantage is being a play blast or pre-visualization tool. However, we like to call it on steroids, because it's a really good representation of what the offline rendering is going to look like before committing to this final offline rendering.
That makes a lot of sense. And so, that really tells me that Vantage is a tool with a very singular focus, right? And if you're going to have a singular focus, you don't want to start adding on additional features that take away from that really focus, that capability, or that previs capability. But then I'm thinking on the other side of things, like Enscape, where it doesn't necessarily have that laser focus, right? There's a lot of capabilities in Enscape. You can make fly-through videos, you can drop in assets. We have moving trees, right? So there's some animated assets and things like that. But then I look at what people always ask, like, well, can I bring in models from multiple locations, or can I have walking people and things like that, or can I have more complex assets dropped in and things like that? And so, to those people that are asking, well, why didn't we just bring in Envision capabilities into Enscape? I'm going to throw that hot potato to you, Petter.
Yeah, I think it is a really interesting question. It is one that we get often, right? And I think it's very much worthwhile to always answer it when we do get it. And there's a number of reasons. I think Not just in software, but I think in other aspects of life too. I think sometimes a strength can also manifest itself as a weakness. So if we look at Enscape here, right, I think one or a couple of its biggest strengths are that plugin nature, and not just the nature of it being a plugin, but it having a very tight bidirectional link to the host application. And another strength that I think very closely complements it is that really the ease of use and the simplicity, right? You don't really need a lot of time or training to start using it. Now, you certainly can take that on and push the quality ceiling higher and higher, but you don't need it, right? So those are strengths, but those also can manifest themselves as weaknesses. So, for example, when people ask for animation, which again, like super essential to telling an immersive story. But the reality is that the CAD and BIM applications where Enscape is integrated into, they don't support that. They don't even have a concept of time. They were never designed as 4D modeling applications. They're 3D. And so for Enscape to even think about putting in that functionality, the first step is just recognizing the fact that we're going to have to fight with the host application, and we're going to have to build in something that they simply do not have. Okay, so if all of a sudden we're adding a layer of functionality onto an existing applications, which is not ours, that comes with a lot of complexity. It's not just the UI of it, but it's also the interaction and the way of really just making it work, right? And I think if you add all those things up, you come to the realization that is it possible? Yes, almost everything is in the realm of technology and software, but it would significantly erode that thing that people love about Enscape, which is the simplicity and the ease of use and maintaining the constant bidirectional relationship to the single source of truth, which is your design model. And so when you look at these things together, I think as a product person and somebody that was a former customer of Chaos and Enscape, actually, you have to ask yourself, is that really the right thing? Or should we actually create something different, which serves as a complement to what we already have and that people love? And for us, the answer was very much the latter, which is why we're now here talking about a complementary product rather than trying to, make everything fit one package, right?
I like that because I think one of my maybe strengths and weaknesses when it comes to my role at Chaos is that if I think it exists, I think it should exist, then it should exist. I'm like, oh well, let's just have animation. Like, why not? But the truth is, there are technical realities, right, that just get in the way, and it also gets in the way of that core part of what people like about Enscape, which is that it's this design companion that just works. You fire it up, and you're in Revit, and you can see what your design is going to look like. And I think that it's important for me to recognize whenever I'm trying to say advocate for the customer, is that the fact that Enscape works isn't just an artifact of luck. It's also an artifact of discipline, that you don't put in all these types of capabilities that will start to make it more unstable, that will start to ask things of the host platform that it frankly can't deliver. So I think that's a very valid way of looking at it. And it's, I think we all want to have the Swiss Army knife that's 2 inches thick, but that you can also use to prepare a perfect French meal. But that just doesn't exist, right? It's except on late night television when they're trying to sell you something ridiculous. But one of the key parts of this, though, is like, okay, if you don't have one thing that does it all, you have several things that really do something a little more specialized, but much better. But we're doing a lot of things to make that workflow integrated, to make it something that it's very functional and intuitive as a person goes from Enscape into Envision. And I think, Anna, maybe you can speak to that. What have we done to really lower that barrier of entry? Because we're talking about really sophisticated capabilities. We're talking about capabilities that were the reserve of a DCC platform. These tools that are used to make Marvel movies. All of a sudden, we're bringing animation, maybe not so sophisticated animation, but pretty sophisticated animation, really high quality materials, the capacity for creating movies with sequencing and bringing in different model components, things like that. How are we making all of those things sort of familiar and accessible to an Enscape customer or an Enscape user?
Well, the first thing is that we worked and developed a unified visual language that will soon be shared across both products. And this means that common tools will look the same everywhere. So if you know how to use them in one app, you will feel right at home in the other. And this basically lets users focus on learning what's new rather than relearning the basics yet again.
So does this mean, like, say, calling a certain button that, like, for, say, camera functionality, like using the same terminology, having the same basic layout, things like that?
Yeah. Yeah, like the select tool or the move tool will look the same in both apps.
So it's like a cousin in a sense, like you can tell they're related.
Yeah. Yeah, and well, additionally, we basically paid close attention to workflows, and our goal was to carry over the most common and intuitive processes and workflows and to make their transition feel seamless, particularly for Enscape users. And a good example of this is the material editor. So it presents core material settings in a way that's very similar to Enscape, while also it introduces additional capabilities, like additional layers that enhance the realism. And they're shown in a more visual or game-like style to keep things engaging and easy to grasp. And for those features that are completely new, like these all the storytelling and animation capabilities, we've worked hard to keep things intuitive and approachable, but we also know that this is still an evolving product. So we're constantly refining things based on feedback. We listen closely to our beta testers, run usability tests, and adapt wherever it makes sense to improve the experience.
And what's great is that we have a solid template to follow with Enscape. People do like the UI. It makes a lot of sense to people. The challenge, of course, is we have a lot of new capabilities. So how do you map them over in a way that makes sense? But that part really addresses, that user interaction with the software, clicking the buttons and understanding them. But there's this other piece that, Simeon, I'm curious if you can shed some light on, which is around the data part of it. And one of the things that I think everyone can appreciate is, like, let's say you lose a document that you're working on and you have to redo it. It always feels like it takes 3 times longer to have to redo something than the first time you did it. And I think one of the biggest frustrations for people is that as they move from, say, Enscape, which they're maybe using during the design process, quick visualizations, into something with more sophisticated visualization capabilities, the fact is that they oftentimes have to redo a lot of work. And one of the big pieces here by having Envision and Enscape under one Chaos umbrella is that we've done a lot of work to facilitate that data transfer, to remove the amount of rework that a person has to do. So I'd be curious if you can shed some light on what that process looks like just what file formats we support, what's the benefits of the file format that we created that's specifically made to transfer data between Enscape and Envision, and what kind of data someone could expect to be able to come across, and what doesn't come across. What should they expect to have to redo in the context of a Enscape Envision workflow?
Right. Yeah, that's an expected question, because everyone, as you mentioned, everyone is trying to solve this. Right. It's a big industry problem, transferring data back and forth, and people always want to know that there can be another step forward. They don't want to end up in a dead end scenario where the data just flows in and it doesn't come out. And we've taken a couple of steps toward that with the adoption of the very scene file format, which is the common rendering description language, if you will, across the Chaos ecosystem. It's supported by all the products at Chaos, and it allows a very universal way of exchanging information and describing information regarding rendering. That includes not only geometry but also shading, lighting, and all kinds of rendering specific data and information. So, however, we also realize that it's a proprietary file format, and while we were certain that this is the right choice for our products, we know that people would like to have an alternative for example, CAD tools that do not have V-Ray or Enscape enabled or supported.
Yeah, or maybe they're just not using the other products.
Yeah, absolutely. And in the spirit of being as open as possible, we considered multiple file formats. So this is why we, as Anna mentioned, we're listening to our requests, and we will be adding support for file formats outside of the ecosystem, namely the very widely available FBX files, which both will take care about geometry, very basic camera lighting, but also some animation. Also OBJ, Collada files, and in the future we'll be also adding support for Alembic files and USD files, more on the.
Yes, I know someone's going to ask about USD, so I'm glad you dropped that in there.
Of course. We're always listening. We're always adding functionality, and this is also one of the things that will end up there. Just to make a small note here, again, the drawback of these file formats is that they will not bear any or substantial shading information. So the limitations that you asked for are manifested in redoing some of the work. So, for example, when
wait, for what file format? The VR scene or yeah? Or
yes,
okay.
the non-V-Ray scene file formats all lack a lot of aspects of shading. So FBX, to simplify it down, whenever you, let's say, take an FBX file from any application that doesn't support V-Ray scenes, you will be challenged with the task to either modify or replace the materials to better suit your needs. Add in lighting if needed, and so on. However, we have the tools for that as well, but I don't want to.
It's just you have to expect to do some work essentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but if you bring in a VR scene, I guess part of what I want to do is properly set expectations. So let's say you are in Enscape and you have a nice render that you've been using for design purposes, but now you want to create that story for communication. You create the VR scene file out of Enscape and you import it into Envision. I guess, Anna, what would I see as the architect there if I did that?
You will see your Enscape scene being transferred to Envision. If I have to put this in one sentence,
it sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
So that means I'm going to see the building as I expect it to see it. I'm going to see the materials. I'm going to see the assets and things like that.
Yes, this is exactly what you're going to see. You're going to see the entire building model. Say that you exported it from Revit. You will even be able to see the native Revit hierarchy being transferred to Envision. You will have all the Enscape 3D assets that were imported from the Enscape library. They will continue to render. So the users will not have to recreate them or rework them, as we know they do if they make this transition to another apps. And they will also have the materials as they were set up and configured with Enscape. They will also have the sky configuration. Like if you add some clouds to the sky, they will get transferred along with the native sun position. So the overall lighting setup will also get transferred. But of course, since we're working with two different render engines, we have Enscape on one side and we have Envision that are using different techniques for generating the final image. That's why the image itself will basically have some differences in, you know, the colors and stuff like that.
Oh,
So these
so
are
let's get into that. Actually, and that's a great topic right there. It gets a little bit nuanced, right? I mean, we've said that aspects of well, Enscape's real time, right? But there's components of ray tracing within, like ray trace shadows and things like that. And then at the same time, we have true ray tracing in the context of the Lavina rendering engine, which is sort of under the hood, the engine, if you will, in the context of Envision. Petter, what would you say is that, you know, what exactly are we talking about from a technical perspective between those two different capabilities? Like, what are some of the technical differences that we start to hit between what the Enscape rendering engine is doing and what it's capable of versus the Lavina rendering engine in Envision?
Sure. Yeah, I think maybe I'll give it a bit of a high level, and then I'll pass over to Simeon to keep me honest. But I think, you know, it goes back to what I was kind of saying a little bit before, is that strengths are sometimes weaknesses, right? So with Enscape, one of our guiding product principles that kind of helps us prioritize things and make the right decisions is speed over quality, which means that we prioritize getting that real-time output out there, and making sure that the tool is responsive and it can render fast enough to get people visual feedback as fast as possible, right? And so because of that, there are parts we do selective ray tracing, as I like to call it, and some of our users, I'm sure you've encountered that, right? In the settings, you can turn on and off certain elements of ray tracing. You don't have to use it, right? If you want a little bit more realism in your image and your output and your decision making, you certainly can, right? But we have a very broad customer base, and there's people on all kinds of machines, right? Unfortunately, not everybody has access to the latest and greatest hardware. And so with Enscape, we prioritize performance and being able to work on more machines rather than prioritizing just the bleeding edge of quality. So and because of a lot of those assumptions, it also allows the engine to stay performant, right? Going back to also the earlier point about the animations, one of those assumptions in the Enscape engine is that objects will never move. And because of that assumption, I'm grossly oversimplifying, right? But that reduces the complexity on the side of the engineering teams. And it means that having that taken as the first principle, as something that will never change, means they can really focus on quality and performance in a much more focused and targeted way. But of course, given the fact that, well, we don't expect anything to ever animate. Lavina is a fully ray traced engine, and I think if you have images from the two engines side by side, you can even start to see some direct comparisons. Glass, transparent materials, perfect example of where Lavina is really going to shine and provide a lot more visual fidelity than Enscape, right? But for that quality, there are, of course, some trade-offs. Again, strengths and weaknesses kind of go hand in hand. But like I said, I think I'll pass it over to Simeon here to keep me honest and fill in a lot of the gaps that I'm sure I knowingly or unwittingly exposed.
So as you pass it over, let me just add another layer of questioning, which is around model size. And what the implications are as far as what's capable as far as model size, both from just sort of one model or the potential to bring in data from multiple places. Simeon.
Right. Yes. Well, everything that Petter mentioned was on spot, on point, and to be honest, that's actually one of the high differentiators that were laid in the foundations of both of the products. As we were talking about Enscape being the speed over quality, or speed with the best possible quality, the same can be reversed for Lavina, or for the rendering engine behind Envision, which is quality over speed, or quality with the best possible speed that we can achieve. And to that point, there are I'm not going to. I don't want to get too technical here, but there's many proofs that the ray tracing type of engine simulates lighting best. It calculates lighting effects and materials representation as best as possible, because it does something very closely to what happens in reality, practically calculating bouncing photons here and there. However, because this is a time-consuming process, it has stayed away from the real-time performance for many years. And with the recent developments in hardware, both hardware and software, we were able to leverage this. So one of the biggest important differences between the traditional real-time engines, also known as rasterizers, and ray tracing engines, is because of the way that they handle data. Poly counts or model complexity is not an issue, or that's maybe a oversimplification of that. It is an issue if you cannot fit it on the memory of the GPU, but apart from that,
that's the limiting factor.
That's the only limiting factor, yes.
So how big are we talking? I mean, like, obviously it depends. You could have a highly faceted, very small object, but, when it comes to your normal architectural projects, I mean, are we talking about the potential to import things on a scale of a city block or more with ray trace fidelity?
Yes, absolutely. City planning is a no issue in a typical scenario. Of course, that depends on the exact GPU model, how much memory you can work with. But typical projects rendered with Lavina and Envision showcase vast spaces. We're talking kilometer-wide spaces and filled with cityscapes, vegetation, characters, and so on. Of course,
I mean, I saw a video that was like that, where it was essentially a city, and you zoomed into the city where there was moving traffic, moving people, waving plants, and you're able to zoom into a leaf or a blade of grass. And then you could zoom back out to the city, and there it was, the whole thing. Like I say, it was a real city moving, a real virtual city, which is pretty incredible when you think about the amount of data that's being processed there.
Yeah. I know many of our viewers probably do not care about polygons, but in essence, every model gets tessellated down or converted into these small triangles that are rendered, and this is what is actually the performance indicator of rendering engines. So in the case of Envision, where we can talk about billions, even trillions of polygons rendered at real-time frame rates, something along the lines of 30, 40, 50 frames per second on an HD resolution.
Yeah, it's hard to wrap my head around that, but you mentioned, actually, both Petr and Simeon mentioned hardware, sort of being the limitation in the context of what we can do in Enscape, the hardware that's used by a lot of customers. And then Simeon, you said this type of new capability for this real-time ray tracing is enabled both by software and hardware. So then I'd say, well, Anna, what do we need to tell our users about hardware requirements here? And are they any different than other Chaos software?
Well, basically the hardware requirements are the same as those for Vantage, of course, because we're using the same render engine. Honestly, I don't know them by heart, besides that you need to have an RTX GPU, but probably Simeon can help me here.
Sure
Simeon,
thing.
yeah, besides an RTX GPU, what does one need?
Yeah, well, the more correct term would be a DXR capable GPU, because that is actually the extension from DirectX that supports ray tracing. So that expands. RTX is more of a NVIDIA tech branding, but if we expand this, the rendering engine supports also the latest hardware accelerated Intel GPUs, but also, and of course, AMD GPU. So if the GPU supports DXR, which stands for DirectX Ray Tracing, it will run with that, with Envision.
All right, and as someone who's not out there constantly shopping for GPUs, can you tell me, like, how common are those GXR capable GPUs?
Yes. I know we mentioned the latest developments, but frankly, these latest developments have been on the market for the last 6 years. So with an average turnover or upgrade frequency, I believe most of our users will already have systems that, or GPUs that support this technology. The variation here will be in the exact tier of the GPU that is actually affecting performance and also model complexity due to amount of VRAM.
All right, so you're not talking about the latest and greatest, which I think is the key thing here. We're talking about an established technology here that we're leveraging.
Everything that has been manufactured in the last 5 years is an absolutely safe bet. So I think it's pretty accessible technology.
Nice, that's definitely key. Now, one of the things that we've danced around a little bit, but haven't mentioned explicitly here, is this idea of bringing in multiple models simultaneously. And I think that's really interesting. You know, I think about some of the limitations of Enscape. It's like, well, you're opening it up in a Revit file or a Rhino file or a Vectorworks file, what have you, and that's the file. And if it's in that file, you can see it. But you're not going to see something in completely, you know, and if you're in Rhino and in Revit, you're not going to see both simultaneously in Enscape. But that's the ask that we get a lot, because you're working on a team that's got a landscape architect, it's got a civil, it's got all these different parties, and each one of them are bringing in different data. And I'm curious, Anna, you know, let's just like address that explicitly. How does that work in Envision? Can you bring in data from multiple places? Is it properly geo-referenced? It all fits together, you know. And then how does that play into this almost unlimited file size conceit that Envision has?
Well, yes, you can, because one of the core concepts of Envision is exactly to assemble data coming from multiple sources or different files coming from the same source. As long as those files are exported in one of the supported file formats, which Simeon already mentioned. And yeah, I can repeat them one more time. First, our proprietary VRASIM format, and then FBX, OBJ, or Cullada. They just get imported, and if something has changed in the host app, you just need to re-export it, and there is a reload button in Envision, and that's it.
And so everything comes in properly synced. So you could have a separate landscape model, an architectural model, and then of course, as you were saying earlier, you can move the individual components. So you can move an element of the building or what have you, or the site furniture, which I think is pretty fantastic.
Yeah, and actually the cool thing is that not only you can assemble the model itself, but using the VRASIM format, you can also assemble visualization work. So yes, you can start the model in, say, Revit and use Enscape and export it from Enscape. But then your colleague might be working on the site context in, say, 3ds Max with V-Ray, and they can also export a VRASIM file and import it in Envision.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's sort of that's the ultimate desire for a lot of people, is that we're not telling you have to use this tool or anything like that. This can serve as this common aggregation point, which it sounds like, honestly, like headache medicine is what this sounds like to me. It sounds really pretty ideal. So I guess we're getting kind of near probably the top of the hour here. And so I want to end with one question here for Petter, which is about what's next. You know, maybe the majority of people don't even have this product yet, but people always want to know what's coming. And so I'm curious from your perspective, when you think about, what are some of the coming big moves that you might see out there? Simeon already mentioned some additional file format support. That's pretty significant. But I'm curious if there's anything else that you see, whether it be just from a philosophical vision perspective, or it be from sort of a brass tacks feature perspective.
Yeah, I'm sure. And look, I think when it does launch, I think that will be people's first question. But hey, look, as a seasoned product person, I know better than to promise things, right? Better under promise and over deliver than the opposite. But look, I think it's important to keep in mind that this is a version 1. This is not an ending point. This is a starting point, right? And I think for us, it's really important, and we want to do more of this, but it's to be driven by the feedback of our communities and the industries they serve, right? So we've got a number of exciting ideas, absolutely. But for me, what's more interesting is to get this thing in the hands of our communities and the industries they work in, and get the feedback, see what's most important to them. And I'm very, very much looking forward to getting that wave of feedback after the release and learning from it, and making sure that we've got our priorities in the right order to serve the communities. But I can certainly say that there are a couple of things, at least at a high level, that are a focus for us. We already talked about it a little bit, but simplifying things, making them easier to use. And I think this is always going to continue to be a focus of ours, whether we use it, or rather whether we do it in a kind of a direct way with the pieces of the puzzle that we have to work with today, or whether we look at emerging technologies. And I think AI is like a really, really great example of that. It's something that has the potential to simplify things greatly. I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities there as well, right? But again, I think it really comes back down to making sure we get enough feedback from the right people that want to use our products and that have problems that they can solve for them in order to help us prioritize. But I think really that's it, is making sure that more and more people have access to really, really engaging, immersive storytelling and visual narrative tools. And I think there's a number of exciting opportunities there that await us, because again, it's just V1. Let's have this conversation again when we're on V10, and I'm sure there will be even more things by then.
Well, I love that. We always say that we're customer driven as a company, and I think that's absolutely true. And I think it's those conversations that we have with our customers that do yield the best results. So absolutely look forward to people getting their hands on Envision and telling us what they think, telling us what they want, telling us success stories that they're having and the new capabilities that they're able to bring to their practice. Honestly, it's going to be very exciting, to say the least. So with that, I'd say great conversation. Thank you for letting me ask some hard questions. Really appreciate it. Good answers all around, and a lot of things for me to think about. And maybe next time, Petter, we can have one that dives deeper into the philosophy of visualization and storytelling and architecture, because that seems like fertile ground that's worthy of even more discussion. But when it comes to Envision, a lot of excitement here, and really looking forward to seeing the product out there in the hands of all of our users.